5th Marines landed in Chu Lai. And I remember I was the first automatic rifleman in the first team, first squad, first platoon for a hotel company. And I remember going down the nets, getting into the Mike boat, headed towards shore, and then the ramp went down. And when the ramp went down, I thought to myself, oh man, I'm in a shooting gallery. There's no place to go here. So we run off this thing and we run up the beach. There's nobody shooting at us. There's none of that stuff going on. In fact, there was a band playing off in the distance. And we got up on the sand dunes and we stopped and sat down and waited. And about 4 or 5 hours later, the company commander comes down, the platoon commanders come down, they give us our marching orders, and we're on our way out to Hill 69. And we're walking through the rice paddies, or on the rice paddy dikes to get there. And then we went over to a place called Hill 10, which is right outside of Chu Lai. And the 5th night there, we pulled an ambush, and I was part of that ambush, and we inflicted some damage on some other people. And then the next night, it's 2:00 in the morning, and one of my teammates, my fire teammates, wakes me up, and he says, come on, it's your watch. So I get up, and I prop my feet down in my fighting hole, and I'm sitting there for just a couple of minutes, and I had made myself a cup of coffee down in the hole, and all of a sudden there's these green lights coming across the valley at us. And I dropped down in the hole and I yelled for my fire team there, Harrison. And he jumps down in the hole and he looks at me and he says, get your helmet on. So that night we got hit by an estimated company plus of heavy weapons, folks who had mortars, and they mortared us and they shot the machine gun at us. If they had done it the opposite way, we wouldn't have known what we were doing, because all you hear are the mortars going in the tube and coming out. But in fact, they opened up with the machine gun. That gave us a little bit of a warning for everybody to get in their holes. So we did. And that night, 2 of the guys got a silver star. 1 guy got a bronze star. We had no casualties, and we inflicted a lot of casualties on them as they came charging across the dry rice paddy at us. And the next day we went out on patrol and we found where they had drug their bodies up into this cave on the other side of the valley. And they were stacked in there, covered with lime. And, we were pretty proud of ourselves. Little did we know it wasn't going to be like that all the time. And then nothing after that. We didn't have anything at all go on for, I don't know, maybe another 2 months. It was, it's just the way it is. It's the nature of the beast. We did a lot of patrolling. We were always looking for them. And eventually we ended up in these 4 little villages just below Hill 69. And I still remember walking point for the first time through some of their areas. I mean, I walked point more than once, and I walked Tail and Charlie, and I walked as part of the main body. And we're walking down this pathway because they didn't have any roads there. The pathway was everything they had. They had carts that they hauled everything in and out of these villages. And on each side of this one, I still remember this, there were these big pads with all this red stuff on them. And and as we got into them, my face started burning, my eyes started watering, my nose started draining. And I remember turning around to my squad leader and saying, what is this? And he says, oh, those are their chilies. They're drying their chilies. So the phosgene gas coming off those chilies was what was making my face burn and everything else. Because you're right. I mean, you're literally almost walking on them. So it was just, but it was those kinds of things. You talk about not so much culture shock as just unbelievable believing that you're in this kind of an environment. And I still remember thinking to this day how different it was in South Vietnam than where I had grown up. I mean, there was jungle all around, there were rice paddies all around, that sort of thing. But I didn't give it any other thought that it's just different. The pace of the fighting for us, we ended up going on a lot of operations. And the operations, I went on 13 of them over my time frame there. Depending on the operation, you were either in it or you weren't. And in my own personal case, I guess, is that I learned to expect to see somebody who didn't like us. And I learned also that I had a responsibility to protect my fellow Marines as well as myself, and to report up the chain what was going on. And that carried on until I became the company radio man. And that happened primarily because I was first told I was going to be the platoon radio man, because Harrison had been overseas before and his time was up. Otis Bartley, he got transferred to 3rd Marines. Jack Centers got transferred to 7th Marines. And so I was the last man in the thing, but I was a very junior Lance Corporal then. So I said, okay, you're going to be the platoon radio man. Well, within a short period of time, I don't know whether I was promoted or I just happened to be in the wrong space. I was sent up to company radio. And then at company radio, I was constantly around the CO as well as the gunny and the XO. I learned more about leadership from Captain Doherty and Gunny Huzak than I ever learned in any of the other myriad of schools that I went to for the Marine Corps. And one of the things I learned the most was sometimes you have to make decisions that nobody is going to like, but it's the right thing to do. And in this particular case, it was the operation where we came out of the bush to an area called Tam Key. And Tam Key was an ARVN base, and it had a huge parade ground. There was really nice sand, and it was lush and was gorgeous, and had a nice road on both sides and all that kind of stuff. And, somebody was going to pull perimeter, and I thought that had already been decided. So I was really looking forward to being able to sleep on some soft sand, and instead the CO comes down and he says, Gunny, we're going out on perimeter. And I thought, oh man, I want to sleep. The end result is that we got up, we got the company, we went down another road, and we went out about 400 meters or so, and we set in a perimeter, the entire company. And early the next morning, I hear a very familiar sound, and it wakes me up, and it's the sound of mortars being fired. And they're not shooting at the perimeter. They're shooting at the parade ground. We lost 4 people that night because the ARVN would not let us dig in on their parade ground. They didn't want any holes in their parade ground. Well, and that was the night that, that Crowder and 2 others that I knew got killed, and 1 other from another company. And I thought about it later on, and I thought, that could have been us. That could have been me. Instead, the boss made a decision that really not very many people were happy with, except that we got to go out and do 3-man rotations. So I've always thought about that, when I've had to make, later on in my career, when I had to make decisions about, is it the right thing to do because you want to do it, or is it the right thing for everybody? And in this case, and down the road, it became the decisions he made and both of them made were the right decisions, not for just them, but for the entire company. And that stuck with me throughout my career. And I'm very fortunate. I had a pretty happy career. We flew into this valley, and we were on an operation just shortly after Hastings. Hastings, I learned on Hastings that we were really fighting professional fighters. They pulled ambushes on us. They patrolled on us. We patrolled on them. We got lucky a couple of times, and we caught them with their pants down, literally. And, we were able to take care of business there. But this one particular time, and it's always stuck with me, and I thought if I ever go back, I would love to be able to go back out there and see this particular temple. And it was a tree temple, and basically it was about maybe 8 to 10 feet wide, probably 10 to 12 feet deep. And there were these deities carved into the tree in there. And in front of each one of these deities was a small bench. And you could see where it had been worn in with the knees of people kneeling on these small benches, praying. Scott, it was so beautiful. I mean, it was just stunningly beautiful. And it was painted. And, it was obvious that somebody really cared about their religion there. And that's stuck with me too later on in my career. And then from there, we patrolled a little bit more, and there was a well, and I've never forgotten this well either. The well was probably 20 feet wide, and it was deep. It was very, very deep. But the thing about it was lined with limestone blocks that were probably 2 by 3 feet each one, all the walls. But between each one, walking down in a circle down to the water line, and you could see where the water level had risen and fallen. And there were these other blocks, same size, stuck in there, so that it was like the step was here, but it was stuck into the wall here, and this was probably about 2 feet. I mean, ingenious, smart. I mean, just, it was a civilization and a society that we don't see. We see a lot of things here in America, but you don't see those kinds of things. And that's always stuck with me. Hastings has always stuck with me. And the operation in Antenna Valley, that has always stuck with me too, because as we're going in, we're taking fire, and everybody takes off their helmets and starts sitting on them. Because you don't want to get shot in the butt. I mean, it's just one of those things. And we land, we exit the aircraft, we go start our patrol package, and we work our way up into the mountains above where later on was the coal mine. And we found a whole series of Vietnamese hooches, but they didn't have normal doors and windows. What they had was these same like rattan pads, and each one of those huts was full from the floor to the ceiling, from wall to wall, with rice. And the NVA had taken it away from the Vietnamese civilians that were there and taken it up into the hills to feed themselves with it. But there were 7 of these things. And I think to myself, oh my goodness, that was a lot. That would have fed a lot of people a lot of time. We pulled it all out, and we gave it to the villagers, and we moved everybody out of Antenna Valley. That changed because a lot of folks went back. They went home. And you can't blame them. It's their house. It's their home. So, there were all those kinds of things, and then Operation Tuscaloosa obviously was a defining moment for the company and the battalion. And it was a very small operation. We had been in that series of villages at Christmas time, and we were supposed to have a Christmas truce, more or less. Didn't happen, but the NVA left. Well, A month later, on the 29th, we went back in there, and they were there, and they were waiting. And the end result was is that we had a number of casualties. They had a lot more than we did. But Tuscaloosa was one time when we literally had two companies in a battalion get online and assault into this built-up village. And I've never ever forgotten, Gunny Huzak coming over to me. He says, I'll take it. He'd been wounded. He had been shot in the arm. And I remember the CO saying to him, Gunny, he says, I need you. He says, stick around, I'll take care of you. And he did, but Gunny Huzak was one of the last people evacuated from the field because he'd been shot through and through in the arm. And, I saw it happen. I saw him spin around, and I saw him hold up his arm. And, the CO and I just, we had radios and we were talking. And it was just one of those things. And that particular one, the battalion commander is not supposed to come up on the company net. There's a battalion net for him. And he's supposed to talk to the battalion radio operator who talks then to the CO. Instead, he came up on my company net. And I told him that the CO was busy with the CEO of Gulf Company and the platoon commanders, and that I was supposed to stay where I was, which I did, and that he should please get off my net. I didn't say it that way, but I did tell him that. And he left, and he says, I understand. And I still remember him say, just the tone of his voice was, I understand. And then he disappeared off my net. We finish up the operation. We go back to Anwa. We go up to the flashpoint, and I'm on radio watch, the first watch that night. And the captain comes in and he sits down on the chair next to me, and he looks at me, and he's kind of got this funny grin on his face. And he says, did you really tell the battalion commander to get off your net? I said, yes, sir. He says, just gets up and walks away. Nobody says a word about it. And I thought, my goose is cooked, but it wasn't. Sometimes you got to take things in your own hands. That's a funny thing is I carried that radio for 9 months. I never was wounded. I came close a couple of times to stepping on a mine. I came close to being shot once or twice, maybe more than that, but none that I really remember as being critical. But no, I was never wounded. I never had any of those problems. I just led a charmed life, maybe.
Well, I know most guys coming back from Vietnam didn't get a warm welcome. What was your return like?
Not warm. I remember thinking to myself, nobody here really gives a damn. Nobody cares. And I got invited to my high school to talk about it. And that's what I said. And when I said it that way, nobody cares here. And it got real quiet in the classroom. And I didn't know anybody in the classroom except the teacher. And his name was Bob Smith. And he was teaching a class on civics. And he says, well, I don't think that's really true. And I just looked at him and I thought, no, it's true. Nobody cared. Nobody did. I mean, I had people glare at me. I had people at the airport glare at me. I had people turn their backs on me. I don't remember. Gary tells me once that a guy spit at us, but I don't remember that, but it was my opinion at the time that nobody really gave a damn. And that's okay. I do what I do. You do what you do.
Do you feel that way today, that people still don't care about Vietnam? Or
Oh no, no. It's truly dramatically changed. And not only in the Corps, but with the public. The public, because of Iraq and Afghanistan and that area of the world, the folks that we put in there to take care of business, that really changed the perception of, the I won't call it the warrior ethos, but I'll call it something like that. People now respect it and it was really funny because today Sally and I were walking around down after we did the tour on the boat, and a couple of people said, thank you for your service. And my response to them always is the same. No, thank you for the support, because you can't do the service unless you have the support. And it doesn't matter if it's in the public or it's in your family life. If they don't support you, you can't do it. It's just, and I said that in front of my squadron before we got ready to deploy one time. I said, we need the support here at home. So if you don't have that support, make sure that you try and tell them that we need it. And a lot of the younger troops didn't understand that till it came time to go and do some other things.
and after the war, did you have any trouble with PTSD?
Mean dreams?
Yeah, dreams, or I don't know if there's a...
Yeah, I still do. Everybody does. Everybody, especially in hotel company. I mean, I don't know anybody that was in hotel company in Vietnam that doesn't sometimes, get these little feelings about it, and fortunately I'm married to a woman who understands that. And she, she'll say, you didn't sleep well last night, that sort of thing. And I say, yeah, and I've had other people who come up to me and say, why are you why aren't you smiling like you normally do? Well, I'm thinking of other things. And that's my standard response. I just, I don't need to dwell on it, but I try to avoid it as much as I can. And I'm like Keith. Keith and I were in the initial landing with hotel company. And he writes down every dream. I don't write down every dream, but sometimes I do, especially when it's a recurring one, because there's something there that keeps me, looking at it. But, and I've gone through enough counseling, especially when I was working on my master's, to know that those things are important. So yeah, it's there. It's always there. It never, no. And Fred was talking about grief yesterday at the memorial. He's right. You're never going to leave it behind. It's always going to be there somewhere in your system or your psyche or your thoughts. It's always going to be there. And he's right.